There appears to be no end in sight to the political crisis in Guyana as the Elections Commission began to recount ballots this Friday. Venezuela has launched a national campaign entitled Sanctions Are A Crime against the United States. Russia and Turkey agreed to a ceasefire in Syria's Idlib province. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss. Protests and demonstrations continue in Guyana, where the results from Monday's general elections remain unclear. The Guyana Elections Commission began recounting ballots on Friday, but only for Region 5 of the country. Meanwhile, bipartisan members of the US Congress have expressed deep concerns over the events. International election observers are in agreement that the results released for Region 4 could not be verified and were presented on Thursday in violation of the established vote tabulation process.
For the day, no meeting of GCOM was held. Two of the commissioners are here. There was no, for any declaration, GCOM has to meet, and there's an injunction that is served on 6 of the commissioners, preventing them, preventing them from meeting without us going back to the verification process.
This is a country with 40% poverty. And instead of focusing on what is good for Guyana, they're focused on their own self-interest and holding on to power by any means necessary. This is an abomination against democracy. It's an abomination against the people of Guyana and our fledgling democracy.
And the drama surrounding Guyana's election results came to a climax on Thursday night. The chair of the Elections Commission was found unconscious on the floor of her office, where she appeared to have been locked in. Meanwhile, diplomats from several major powers said that the unverified results released from the capital region were not credible. There were scenes of chaos as opposition leaders, including PPP General Secretary Barak Jagdeo and international observers, attempted to enter the chairwoman's office to see if she was all right after no one had seen her all day long. They were blocked by the police. Meanwhile, the opposition has described the situation as electoral theft, while international observers from the European Union and the United Kingdom have questioned the legitimacy of the electoral process.
The SOPs, the statement of polls, which are the verified documents, the official documents from the Guyana Elections Commission, are still in that building behind us, in which they're giving us no access to. So we have no access to the official documents in order to find verified results of this election. Last night, after they stalled the count and delayed everything, we had left all of our agents, every party, every political party and every international organization left agents within the building. And those agents were then, after we had left, after the main political parties with their numbers had left, they went into the building with guns and armed police and physically removed everyone and left those documents, those official documents, unprotected.
In other news, Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, has launched a national campaign entitled Sanctions Are A Crime, which will denounce the damage caused by economic sanctions to the Venezuelan population. During a press conference, Rodriguez highlighted that Venezuela has presented dozens of reports to the International Criminal Court, noting that unilateral US sanctions violate international law and should be considered crimes against humanity.
On February 13, Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza went to the International Criminal Court in The Hague to once again present our case to prosecutors. Venezuela is living through a very particular situation when it comes to international law. For the first time, there is a case being presented where we have shown that unilateral, coercive measures that today make up a fundamental part of the foreign policy of the United States are crimes against humanity. We presented an extensive report where we documented all the actions carried out by the U.S. and the confessions made by their officials about how these sanctions directly hurt our citizens.
Colombian authorities are investigating the murder of former guerrilla Astrid Conde Gutierrez on Thursday in Bogotá. Since the Colombian peace accords were signed in 2016, 191 former guerrilla members have been killed in the South American country. The FARC party denounced the latest assassination on social media. The Legal Solidarity Corporation, an NGO that defends human rights, said in a statement that Conde was in the process of reincorporation into society and studying in the Colombian capital. The FARC party also denounced the government's campaign of obstacles and stigmatization in regards to former guerrillas. The National Federation of Secondary Students in Paraguay is demanding the resignation of the Minister of Education. It's also criticizing the lack of investment in public education.
Social movements have been warning about the education crisis in Paraguay. For students, this is worse now due to mismanagement by the current government and its ministers.
We want the budget reprogramming to increase the funds for free education and also increase for school meals. We are also demanding the resignation of Minister Eduardo Peta because this is already unsustainable. We are tired of his incompetence, and all he did was aggravate the education crisis in our country.
The Ministry of Education closed almost 1,500 classrooms at the beginning of the 2020 school year, something that was criticized by the teachers' unions. Also in 2019, it didn't provide for the replacement of retired teachers, leaving thousands of students without classes.
Last year, we had the situation that 3,000 teachers retired and 40,000 students were left without teachers in their classes. So this is something that we cannot continue to tolerate because their mistakes will get worse and worse, and that will lead to education in this country simply falling into decline. No significant progress has been seen.
Paraguay invests only 3% of its GDP in education, according to official data, but the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, recommends at least 7%, which is what student organizations are calling for.
They need to increase the share of gross domestic product that is invested in education. According to UNESCO, 7% is the minimum that a country should invest in education, but we have not reached that amount, and it is something that we have been demanding since 2015.
Data from the Ministry of Education show that only 4 out of every 10 children who enter the education system complete high school. The students say this reflects an exclusionary model that reproduces poverty and marginalization.
And we have more stories coming up after this break. Don't go away. Welcome back. Chileans are preparing to mobilize this Sunday to mark International Women's Day. The slogan, "Never again without us women," has become common during the widespread protests across the country as activists stress that the call for gender equality and women's rights is as important as the demand for social and economic reforms. Alondra Carrillo, spokesperson for one of the country's largest feminist advocacy groups known as 8M, explained that as well as sharing the demands of the wider protest movement, Chile's women are voicing specific gender-related issues, including the demands for legal abortion, an end to domestic violence, and greater equality in the workplace. And our correspondent in Chile, Paola Dragnit, brings us more details on the mobilizations this weekend.
Friday, March 6 sees the lead-up to this feminist strike that is planned for Sunday and Monday. This is a huge mobilization of Chilean women who are going to take to the streets throughout the country within the framework of this social unrest. Today, Friday, sees the March Against the National Minor Service, this Chilean state institution that over the years has massacred hundreds of children who the state supposedly must take care of. But also in Dignity Square, on Radio Dignity Square, the national Iyapu Band and also Nano Stern are set to perform, who have composed this song that has moved all Chileans in honor of Gustavo Gatica, titled Regale mis ojos. We should recall that Gustavo Gatica was attacked by Chilean police and lost both of his eyes. He is a young man who is studying at university and currently having to prepare to learn how to live a new life without being able to see, precisely because of the violence of this Chilean state. Today will be a long day, as this Friday is the first since this year's return to the normal working week in Chile.
The murders of social leaders in the Latin American region continues. On Wednesday, Daniquel Oliveira dos Santos was murdered in Uberlândia by the military police of Minas Gerais. The homeless workers' movement leader was the coordinator of the Occupation Fidel Castro community. According to the movement, Santos was undertaking maintenance work when an officer of the military police shot him in the head. In protest against the murder, members of the organisation blocked a road and were met with police repression, with 3 persons injured. And news of the murder of Dominga Ramos Salol, a farmer and leader of the Peasant Development Committee of Guatemala, was reported on Thursday. The 52-year-old social leader worked in Cadeca, a community organisation that has sustained a fight against land dispossession and the privatisation of national property in the territory, which has cost the lives of several of its leaders. According to statements, the victim was at her home in Las Delicias village, accompanied by her daughter-in-law, who warned her that a man was asking for her at the door. Upon leaving her home, the social leader was shot 8 times, as reported by the National Police of Guatemala. Peruvian President Martin Vizcarra announced the country's first confirmed case of coronavirus in a televised statement on Friday as the disease begins to spread across South America. The patient is a 25-year-old man who travelled to Spain, France and the Czech Republic, Vizcarra added. The head of state also called to remain calm and trust in the Peruvian health system. South American neighbouring countries, Argentina and Chile, also announced their first confirmed cases this week, while a number of cases have been confirmed in Brazil. The head of the World Health Organization said on Friday that the world was on the verge of reaching 100,000 confirmed coronavirus cases and urged all nations to make containment their highest priority. The global death toll surpassed 3,283 countries have reported cases. Meanwhile, the Vatican confirmed its first case of the novel coronavirus on Friday and closed some offices as a precaution, while Pope Francis continues recovering from a cold. Hungary has confirmed 4 cases of COVID-19 so far, while Togo, Australia, Cameroon and Serbia reported their first COVID-19 cases on Friday. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas declared a 30-day state of emergency on Thursday after coronavirus cases were reported in the West Bank city of Bethlehem. The decree was announced by Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shedyer hours after officials closed Bethlehem's Church of the Nativity and banned foreign tourists from West Bank hotels. The country decided to close all schools, colleges and kindergartens and to cancel foreign tourist reservations. 7 coronavirus cases had been registered by Thursday in the West Bank. Ministers from the Organisation of the Petroleum Exporting Countries have recommended a cut of 1.5 million barrels per day in the face of the global slowdown caused by COVID-19 and the resulting fall in demand for oil. Producers had already had to contend with abundant supplies weighing on prices, but in recent weeks the spread of the novel coronavirus across the world has sent prices plummeting. According to the plan drawn up by OPEC, the group will take on 500,000 barrels of the cuts. The 23 producers gathering on Friday have tried to support prices through strict quotas on production since early 2017, initially in the order of 1.2 million barrels per day. And we're taking one last break now, but stay with us for more on the developments in Syria. Don't go away. Welcome back. Russia and Turkey agreed to a ceasefire in Syria's Idlib province on Thursday after a dangerous escalation of the conflict there left scores of Turkish and Syrian soldiers dead. Our correspondent in Syria, Hisham Wanas, brings us more details on the situation there.
Hello, greetings to my colleagues and our viewers. Indeed, this Thursday, March 5th, the presidents of Russia and Turkey, Vladimir Putin and Recep Tayyip Erdogan, held a summit and agreed to establish a ceasefire in the western Syrian province of Idlib, the last terrorist stronghold in the country. The ceasefire entered into force from the first hours of Friday, March 6th. There is currently a cautious calm in the combat area in Idlib, where the Syrian Arab Army maintains a degree of preparation to respond to any violation of this ceasefire by the terrorists, as occurred on previous occasions. The Russian and Turkish presidents also agreed to create two safe corridors on both sides of the M4 highway that connects Idlib to the coastal province of Latakia. The safe corridors will stretch 6 kilometers to the north and south-north of the M4 highway. And they also agreed that from March 15th they could undertake joint patrols on the M4 between Idlib and Latakia. It is worth highlighting that according to experts, the agreement does not call for the withdrawal of Syrian troops from the areas of recently liberated in Idlib and Aleppo, which total 215 towns and villages across an area of 1,900 square kilometers. This represents a consolidation of the achievements made by the Syrian army in the fight against the terrorists. The agreement also ratifies the commitment of both countries to the sovereignty and independence of Syria and the need to continue the fight against terrorists. On the same day this agreement was reached, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad reiterated the determination of Damascus to continue the fight against the terrorists in Idlib, the extremists of foreign forces, and also stated that the military operations will continue in the northeast of Syria, where the United States troops are illegally present. The Syrian people, as well as the Syrian authorities, welcome this agreement, but ratify that they would not stand idly by in the face of foreign attacks or any attempts to save the terrorists, as well as any attempts to manipulate the humanitarian issue in order to intervene in Syria's internal affairs. Likewise, the Syrian Arab Army maintains a high degree of preparation, and the situation is currently tense despite the cautious calm in Idlib.
Brief clashes erupted on the Turkish-Greek border on Friday as migrants attempted to push through into Greece. Greek police fired tear gas at those trying to break through a border fence. Calm was quickly restored, with hundreds of migrants sitting and chanting peace, freedom, and calling for authorities to open the gates. Makeshift camps for thousands of asylum seekers have sprung up around the border since Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan announced last week that they would no longer be stopped from trying to leave the country. Meanwhile, the Greek authorities continue to claim that the situation represents a serious threat to its national security. And a number of migrants from Turkey have arrived to the Greek island of Lesbos. The humanitarian crisis unfolding there has been met with indifference from the European Union. The new surge in the number of migrants who have arrived to Lesbos by boat from Turkey has spiked already high tensions on an island that has been on the front lines of the migration crisis for years. More than 1,700 migrants have landed in Lesbos and another 4 Greek islands over the past week, adding to the 38,000 that are already crammed into overstretched migrant camps. Greece has suspended asylum processing procedures in a bid to halt the new arrivals.
They told us that if you don't go to borders, you have to come back, and you be forced to come back to Turkey, and people don't like to come back because they don't have any good situation. There isn't anything.
To us, we are in need of better life, better situation, just for having freedom. We are just in need of peace. And the situation here is awful. It's really awful. We are in need of water, food, oxygen, really.
The spokesman for the Interior Ministry of Afghanistan confirmed that at least 27 people were killed and 29 wounded in an attack at a memorial for a minority Shiite leader in the capital Kabul on Friday. Several prominent political leaders escaped the remembrance ceremony unhurt, including Abdullah Abdullah, a top contender in last year's presidential election. The attack was carried out by unknown gunmen who opened fire during the memorial to mark the 25th anniversary of the death of Abdul Ali Masari, the leader of Afghanistan's minority ethnic Hazaras. Authorities confirmed that security forces cleared the area but did not manage to capture those responsible for the attack. The Taliban denied any involvement in the attack, which came after a deal signed with the US on Saturday, paving the way for the withdrawal of US troops from the country. The US-based online news publication The Intercept on Thursday revealed the attempts of an anti-Iran pressure group with close ties to the Trump administration to try to persuade major pharmaceutical companies to end their business with Iran. Despite a massive coronavirus-related public health crisis in Iran, the United Against Nuclear Iran pressure group continues with its campaign targeting medical trade with Iran, despite the Trump administration's special financial channels and licenses issued by the Treasury Department for humanitarian goods and medicines to reach the sanctioned country. The legal channels for humanitarian trade to Iran are widely reported to be failing to provide a sufficient flow of medicine and other goods. The United States has extended sanctions against Zimbabwe by 1 year, saying that the new government's policies continue to pose an unusual and extraordinary threat to US foreign policy. US President Donald Trump wrote to Congress on Wednesday saying the restrictions will not be removed until Zimbabwe's President Emerson Mnangagwa administration implements political reforms. He accused the government of persecuting its critics and economic mismanagement over the past year. A group of 16 African countries called on the US and EU to immediately lift the sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe and give the country an opportunity to recover from its economic crisis. The Zimbabwean government recalled its commitment to the development of the country and socio-economic welfare of its people. And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.